I'd like to call Dr. Kathleen Anderson to the podium, please. Dr. Anderson grew up in Western Canada, another Canadian today, and was involved in multiple equestrian disciplines. After receiving her degree in veterinary medicine, she entered private practice in Massachusetts. Specializing in performance horse practice, she currently owns Equine Veterinary Care, a racing and performance practice located at Fair Hill Training Center. In 2015, Dr. Anderson became president of the American Association of Equine Practitioners, and she also serves as the vice chair of AAEP's Racing Committee and is the Performance Horse Task Force Chair. Please welcome Dr. Anderson.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone here. It's been a long afternoon, and I guess this is the end is near. It is an honor and a pleasure to speak with you today, although when Jim Gagliano first asked me to speak on this topic of the end of life, I must say I was a little taken aback. As an equine veterinarian focused on the health of racehorses and their second careers, I must say that although the end of life is inevitable for all, man and beast, it is not a subject that comes up very often except under duress. So after careful consideration, I agreed that yes, this was a fair topic to have a thoughtful discussion about. So I'm fortunate to start my days early at the Fair Hill Training Center. It's about approximately 2 hours north of here, nestled in the tri-state corner of Maryland, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. We have a unique 700-horse facility on 300 acres with 3 training surfaces based on a private-public partnership with the State of Maryland Department of Natural Resources. We operate as a condominium association on an independent, sustainable budget. Many of you are familiar with some of the horses, trainers, and barn owners that have campaigned from Fair Hill. Better Talk Now, Barbaro, Animal Kingdom, Round Pond, Michael Matz, Graham Motion, Tom Proctor, Lael Stable, and the chair of the Jockey Club, Mr. Stuart Janney, to name a few. So what happens to these and the legions of other racehorses across the country? Some, such as Barbaro, suffer inexplicable catastrophic injuries that ultimately lead to the decision to euthanize them for humane reasons. Others go on to to the breeding shed and look to make their mark on generations to come. And yet others enter into second careers that inevitably come to a close at some point along the way. So what should we do to better prepare for the inevitable end of life? Today, my plan is simple. I'm going to just lay out some information to put into the mix. Every scenario is different. Every horse is different, and every owner or decision maker has different factors to consider. I think it's important to consider the entire subject of death. So euthanize comes from the Greek terms eu and thanatos. A good death means minimal pain at the appropriate time with unnecessary pain and suffering. This is a horse that had a good death. I owned this horse, No Worries, for 23 years. He was a very versatile horse, starting his second career as an event horse, for many years providing me with a great way to unwind, and in his later years acting as a schoolmaster for young riders needing confidence. In June 2011, fate intervened. He simply dropped dead after vigorous play in the field with his pasture mates. After my initial grief, I realized that No Worries had given me a final parting gift, a farewell solution that did not require a decision on my part. If only it were always that easy. So most of my discussion will be directed at the adult thoroughbred. Those in the breeding game are well aware of the life and death challenges of neonates through the yearling stage. Often the decision is pretty straightforward and determined by circumstances. But any life cut short too early invariably leaves the lingering question, what if? Similarly, racing, sometimes fraught with unknowns such as training incidences, shipping fever, unexpected colics, is a finite period in these horses' lives with a responsive dialogue between owner, veterinarian, and trainer working to make good choices in the best interest of the horse. Loss is always difficult, but certainly in my world, clear decisions are made in an appropriate time frame. Which brings us to the life stage that spans many more years and presents a definite gray zone. physically and philosophically. Although it is commonly stated that we are only as old as we feel, the reality is that age is inescapable. The question ultimately becomes when. Sometimes emergencies draw a clear line for we, the decision makers. This fracture radiograph was taken posthumously by me a few weeks ago. This horse raced successfully until he was 10. He was very fortunate to land with a woman who reschooled him for the show ring and even named her newly acquired small farm after him. Alas, although the stars had aligned for him for most of his life, in the end he became the victim of a pasture accident and was euthanized. Was this a good death? I think yes. He did not linger, nor did he develop chronic complications we sometimes see with efforts to save these critical cases. In the most recent Equine Disease Quarterly, funded by the underwriters of Lloyd's of London, the causes of mortality in aged horses in Kentucky was reported. Although these findings exclude obvious causes of mortality, such as catastrophic accidents, or the known chronic conditions such as founder or progressive arthritis, they do provide answers for the unknown afflictions that are oftentimes tough for caretakers to make a clear end-of-life decision. Some of these findings suggest that there may be ways to manage older horses better, to decrease the incidence of colic, for example, but primarily the findings serve to support the fact that we often just don't know what the future holds. Many of the photos I have today are taken at Old Friends Farm by a volunteer, Laura Battles. Some of you will recognize the familiar profiles of past champions. I had the pleasure of visiting with Michael Blowen, our keynote speaker tomorrow, at Old Friends Farm on a cold February day this spring, and was very moved to see so many happy horses living out their lives. However, this is not always the case. The American Association of Equine Practitioners has developed the following euthanasia guidelines to assist in making humane end-of-life decisions. The first and last points you will note there are often associated with chronic founder. How much is too much? A surgical or medical condition with a hopeless prognosis could be as simple as the fractured radius I showed you. But sometimes it falls into the category where the diagnosis is made on post-mortem, but the lack of response to treatment has pointed the way. The risk to horse and handler can often be associated with significant neurologic deficits or pain-related behaviors. Discussion of these guidelines with your veterinarian when facing the final decision is often invaluable to provide end-of-life care in the best interest of the horse. Additionally, a horse should not have to endure conditions of lack of feed or care that erodes their quality of life. The Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, which you've heard much about today, is represented at this forum and is actively addressing the standard of care for thoroughbred retirement facilities through education and accreditation policies. Hoarding mental illness can sometimes masquerade in rescue behavior, and off-the-track thoroughbreds oftentimes pay the price for our willingness to accept easy solutions to place horses. There are three basic tenets needed for aftercare of racehorses: enough food, fresh water, and adequate shelter from the elements. These basic tenets are not new. The 5 freedoms is a core concept in animal welfare that originated in a UK government report in 1965, over 60 years ago. A safe, well-ventilated protection for the elements in sleet and sun is all they need. Since the racing world loves acronyms, we even have one for evaluating the health of debilitated horses. Put in more simple terms, the acronym MEDW refers to movement, eating, drinking, and weight, and is used in the evaluation of stages of disability. This slide demonstrates the criteria for retirement facilities to evaluate movement when it comes to placement or end-of-life decisions. In veterinary medicine, lameness is graded on a 5-point scale, with mild conditions starting at a grade 1 and progressing to total lack of weight bearing at a grade 5. When a given horse must constantly struggle to move, its condition may very well have progressed to a point where euthanasia should be considered. This is a great picture of a group of happy retirees moving out, moving up, and not yet ready for any end-of-life decisions. A loss of appetite, a general disinterest in feed, or the physical ability that prevents chewing and swallowing are all signs for concern. If eating, desire, or ability is severely compromised and dental or other conditions cannot be corrected, again, euthanasia should be considered. Drinking, too, must be monitored. Horses must be able to easily seek, move towards, and consume appropriate amounts of water daily to maintain function. Horses with a physical or neurologic deficit prevent them from obtaining adequate water should also be considered for euthanasia. Clearly, body condition scores for this group is not a concern, but a body's condition score can vary for time of year, age, and response to a medical condition. An older, skinny horse that is eating, drinking, and moving is not a reason for euthanasia. However, deteriorating body weight and condition as a result of old age or an ongoing medical condition will lead to weakness and the inability to comfortably survive. Additional shelter and feed options may prolong their quality of life, but ultimately horses that are non-responsive to these efforts should definitely be considered for euthanasia. It is not acceptable to allow an emaciated death of natural causes. And I say that with emphasis because I have seen it far too often when people are reluctant to make a decision. So most of what I've shared today with you is common sense, but I think that part of this that is missing in the equation is the act of planning. A recent survey done by the USDA APHIS Veterinary Service and released February of 2017 reviewed a representative sample of operations with 5 or more equids in 28 states, representing about 72% of all equids in the US, to determine equid end-of-life planning. And interestingly, there was a significant, greater than 50% group of people who did plan. So what were the factors that played into the end-of-life decisions? And primarily pain and suffering, and then this seemed to be the determining factor. Likelihood of survival, this goes back to our 5 euthanasia criteria. Costs of treatment, economics do play a part in these older horses' lives. Return to use, length of recovery, and very small insurance. So about 10 years ago, I was called to a farm that I was unfamiliar with to see a down horse. It was a cold, rainy October day, and I arrived to find an old horse lying knee-deep in mud, covered with a blanket. He had a very low body score and was unable to rise. His kind eye begged me to send him on his way, which I did, but not before I left the scene with his lip tattoo recorded to investigate how he had ended up at this tragic departure point. What I discovered was that he had raced successfully, earning his owner breeders more than $500,000 before he retired to their farm at age 8. By age 20, his owners had passed away, and the estate placed the horses with a variety of well-meaning people, but none committed to lifetime care. At age 25, he was on his 3rd new home, and clearly he had not thrived. I ask you, is it morally right to put the burden of care on others for these old warriors? Why not consider a good death? So I've quoted from several sources, which are listed here for you to explore if you're so inclined. My role here today is to prompt the difficult conversation of end-of-life decision-making that is part and parcel of the aftercare of racehorses. We in America have no choice but to step up and accept this responsibility. Processing of horses for meat does not exist in the United States, and the public sales venues and transportation for export is fraught with risk for all age horses. Aftercare is an ongoing development and surely will improve, but it's not taking care of all of the horses. Responsible ownership includes making difficult decisions. The heart of the horse is what makes them champions, competitors, and friends. Horsemanship and veterinary medicine are both an art and a science, and we are the stewards of the horse. We must serve them well. For the wind of heaven is that which blows between a horse's ears, and anyone who's been a rider knows that. So I know it's late in the day, and I thank you all for your attention, with special thanks to the International Forum for the Aftercare of Racehorses, program sponsors, Godolphin and the Jockey Club, and to the wonderful photographers who provided me with the images that I used today. In closing, I would like to leave you with one last image. Better Talk Now, winner of the 2004 Breeders' Cup Turf, retired in a roadside paddock at Fair Hill Training Center, where I see him every day in my rounds, living the good life, and I have no doubt that he will end with a good death. Thank you.